everybody? Welcome in to another episode of the NFL Seekers podcast. Today, we're coming at you with our top 20 running back rankings. We'll be talking about running backs 20 to 11. We'll be yapping about 10 running backs today. We'll give you our top 10 running back episode with our next episode. So stay tuned for the NFL Seekers for all of our fantasy rankings. It's really fun, getting the ADPs together, drafting, and just getting these fantasy rankings. It's the best time of the year. But how are you, Josh?
I'm doing good. My mind just went completely blank, but we're getting into the dog days of the summer, man. It's getting hot, it's getting warm. Football is nearing upon us. Once you hit those slow days of summer, just right around the corner is football season. So, looking forward to the fall, but excited for summer.
Yeah, slow days, like you said, we had to get our fantasy rankings out there. We'll probably get, our final rankings right before fantasy draft start as well. But we wanted to get these initial rankings out to you guys. And with that, let's just get right into it. Let's start it off with the honorable mentions because there are a few guys that I, just barely missed the list that I did really want to talk about. And I'll start it off with Zach Moss, a new Bengals running back. I'm really excited for his situation. I'll be honest, he's my RB20 and he's being drafted as the ADP running back 30 right now. So I have him 10 spots higher than consensus. I'm just really high on him. I'm high on the situation. I don't see why he can't be Joe Mixon. Last year, I thought Joe Mixon looked pretty trash as a running back, honestly, but he was just pounded by the Bengals in such a good situation and so many goal line, really touchdowns that are just so easy and schemed up. So I think Zach Moss will just be a shoe-in Joe Mixon replacement. So I really, really love him. I love his situation. These two guys in the middle, James Conner and David Montgomery, they're being drafted right around running back 20. Not the most exciting options, a little bit older. Some running backs behind them that will definitely threaten them, and that's why they're being drafted, though. But we did want to mention them because they're going to, be consistent and good running backs. And I know you were really high on Tony Pollard.
Yeah, no, I mean, I really like the situation that Tony Pollard's going into. With a younger quarterback going into his second year, I feel like they really want to establish the run under Brian and Bill Callahan. And Tony Pollard was always better when he had that 1-2 punch. And so I think Tajay Spears could kind of be that perfect complement. Even though they do complement each other really well, they're going to take the load off of each other. And when you put Tony Pollard in those certain, third downs and stuff, that's when he's his most explosive. So when you can scheme up some really fun, exciting stuff, which Brian Callahan should definitely, or yes, sorry, Brian Callahan should definitely be able to do. Tony Pollard should be back to his explosive, fun self. So I don't feel like he was a true bell cow, and I don't feel like he benefited from that role. So I'm excited to see his role in Tennessee. And Zach Moss, man, definitely want to shout him out. 1,000 all-purpose yards, 7 touchdowns last year, 4.3 yards per carry. And if people don't remember, he was the running back 5 like the first 6 weeks into the NFL season as Jonathan Taylor was hurt. And he was ultra productive. He was fantastic. He was a fantasy menace. And so I don't see any reason why Zach Moss won't have super high upside in this Bengals offense with Joe Burrow. It's going to be a very friendly scheme. I feel like he's going to be the one to get all the goal line touches. And, I feel like Joe Burrow throws to the running back quite a bit. So, you insert a younger player, arguably more explosive in his career right now than Joe Mixon was last year. And I think Zach Moss could sneakily be a very, very big steal in fantasy football.
Yep, just fantastic situations for really all these guys. I think we're lower on David Montgomery than consensus, the both of us, just because we do expect Gibbs to really take over the backfield. Like the end of the season, he took over the goal line carries, and that's where it gets really scary for Monty. So we'll talk about these deeper running backs later, and later episodes we'll come up with some creative fantasy episodes to talk about these guys. But with that, let's get on to our RB20, a new Chicago Bear, DeAndre Swift. He comes in at my RB21. He stores his RB17, and he's a consensus RB22 right now. Actually, just updated. He's actually the consensus RB21. So we're right there, right ahead of consensus. He's our RB20 for the NFL Seekers. I'll let you talk him on him first, though. You're a lot higher on him.
Yes, I am high on DeAndre Swift. And usually I'm not high on running backs from Philadelphia because that running back committee, but DeAndre Swift kind of really took that role and really ran with it. I mean, he went for 1,000 rushing yards with 5 touchdowns to go along with 200 receiving yards and only 1 touchdown through the air. But I do expect him to be a lot more productive through the air in Chicago. I feel like Caleb Williams is going to be having to check down to his running back a lot. And there's a reason that Chicago went out there and immediately signed DeAndre Swift. He was one of the first, I think he was the first player signed in free agency this offseason. They paid him a hefty bag. So expect DeAndre Swift to be the bell cow, to be the lead back. And with a rookie young quarterback, I think they check down a lot. DeAndre Swift has pretty good hands, and he should really benefit from that. So I'm pretty high on DeAndre Swift this season.
Yeah, he should definitely get some good work in the receiving game. He's a pretty capable receiver. Honestly, the Eagles didn't use him as a receiver at all, but I do think people will be surprised if he gets that workload. I don't know. The workload will be interesting because Roshan Johnson and Khalil Herbert. That is something that I keep coming back to. But at the same time, I could totally see DeAndre Swift just being like the three down guy and kind of just discounting the rest of the running backs in that room. I remember last year, people were thinking Kenneth Gainwell was going to take over Swift, and Swift just held that starting role the entire season, and he was really productive. He was honestly a really good fantasy back. He finished as a top 20 back. He felt like a pretty steady option. I think he is being underrated. He's going as that ADP RB21. I think this Bears offense is just going to be so good and scoring so much. He's going to be in good situations. It will be interesting to see if he is the goal line back. Maybe that will screw him over a little bit. But I mean, last year he had Jalen Hurts screwing him over anyway. So yeah, very interesting, polarizing running back because of the new situation. But I do think it's if not a very similar situation, it could even be a plus just because they're probably going to target him a little bit more, focalize around Swift a little bit more than the Eagles did, where they could just attack AJ Brown and Devontae Smith. I know the Bears have an awesome receiving core, but I do think they all kind of complement each other well. So it will be very interesting to see how he does. It's a very polarizing back, but yeah, we're both higher on him than consensus. I think he's going to be a pretty fun option. And yeah, I like him in our top 20.
Yeah. And he's 25, he's 25, so he's young. I feel like he's just hitting the start of his prime in his career. I feel like this is really where he's going to explode. Like last season was his first 1,000 yard rushing season. So, and obviously the Eagles had one of the better offensive lines. So I think he goes into a perfect situation with the Bears offensive line. But yeah, I mean, he's just hitting his stride, and big things to come from DeAndre Swift.
Absolutely. And with that, let's go into our RB19, Rhamondre Stevenson. He's my RB18. He stores as RB19. He's the consensus RB20, and he comes in as our RB19, right ahead of consensus. I definitely like Rhamondre. I think it's an interesting, polarizing option as well, kind of like Swift. They're definitely in that same tier. They do bring in Antonio Gibson over from Washington. That will be interesting. He's a lot better than Zeke. He's actually a really capable receiving back. So it will be interesting to see what happens on third downs. But at the same time, I was pretty impressed by Rhamondre as a receiver. I think he's a pretty good receiving back in his own right. I think he's a pretty solid all around back. The upside might be a little bit capped with Antonio Gibson and just the offense in general. It's like we saw last year, it's not going to be the most explosive offense, but there is some upside there with Drake May. So I think Drake May actually, makes you more comfortable in drafting Rhamondre, knowing that there's a potential Justin Herbert type quarterback in that locker room to, complement Rhamondre. So I do think there's some untapped potential with him. I think the ADP is fine. We're both drafting him ahead of his ADP, so I think that's valid. He averaged 12.1 last year, wasn't great. Zeke probably got too much work. I think he'll be a little bit better this year, honestly.
Yeah, and I mean, coming back from injury, obviously, you're hoping he gets back to that 2022 form where he had, 1,000 rushing yards to go along with 421 receiving yards. So that's kind of what you're hoping from Rhamondre Stevenson. And I'm not really too scared about Antonio Gibson. I feel like he is a good complementary piece. And, obviously Gibson comes in as a, capable wide receiver back. But I mean, just the volume that the Patriots were giving Zeke, I thought was just a little ridiculous at the beginning of the season when Rhamondre was just the clear cut better running back. So obviously, it's a totally revamped Patriots team with Bill Belichick leaving. So we'll see how Gerard Mayo runs this team. But, I think you gotta, become confident he's gonna have his rookie quarterback leaning on Rhamondre Stevenson to do a lot of the work and to take a lot of pressure off Drake May. So, I think Rhamondre is gonna get back to that 2022 form where I think he will rush for 1,000 yards. He's plenty capable of, and I think he will be, that kind of 60, 70 target type of guy this offseason or this season with Drake May too.
Yeah, that is interesting. So ESPN only projects him to have 811 yards this year. Fantasy Pros projects him at 750. So I think we're both higher on that. I do expect him to get right around 1,000 if he's healthy as well. So that is interesting. It will be something to monitor. But yeah, I think we're drafting him ahead of ADP. I think he will be someone that pays off that ADP and where he's going. And I think he's going to be a good pick. So yeah, really like Rhamondre. Anything else you want to say on him?
No, no, let's move on to 18.
All right, let's move on to our RB18, Mr. Aaron Jones. Another running back moving to a new team. There's going to be a few of them that we're going to talk about today. But Mr. Aaron Jones moving over to Minnesota. He comes in at my RB19. He stores his RB16. He's the consensus RB18, and we're right there as well. He's at NFL Seekers RB18. I'll let you talk about Aaron first.
First off, I've always been a big Aaron Jones fan, a big Aaron Jones believer, and I think the thing that I was always pissed me off is freaking AJ Dillon, man. I that guy's terrible. He always took so much from Aaron Jones. It seemed like last year they're kind of stirring away from AJ Dillon, but I mean, I'm excited. I think Aaron Jones, he comes in, he takes a 1 year contract. Players always play better on that 1 year deal because it's a prove it deal. And I think he goes to a damn good situation in Minnesota. They got a good offensive line. You're playing with Kevin O'Connell as your play caller, which is just, and going to be incredible for a guy like Aaron Jones, but he's really going to benefit because I mean, if JJ McCarthy or Sam Darnold, whoever rolls out their week one, I mean, we project JJ McCarthy to start at some point this season. I mean, again, it's another rookie quarterback who's going to heavily rely on his running back. And Aaron Jones is very capable through the air. He's also a very good runner. I mean, obviously last year, he dealt with some injuries, so hopefully he cleans that up. But I mean, if we're going back again, 2022, Aaron Jones, 1,100 rushing yards and almost 400 receiving yards last year. Obviously took a dip because he was in and out of the lineup with injuries. But another guy who I think could just really explode in Minnesota, man. I just think he's really going to take advantage of the 1 year contract and try and get himself a bigger deal next year. But he's just going to be that safety net for the two quarterbacks there. And I think he'll have a lot of receiving yards. I'm banking on Aaron Jones to maybe catch like 60 or 70 passes and have 500 plus receiving yards.
That that would be massive. Wow, that would be a pretty good output for him. Yeah, he is in the perfect situation. I do like the offensive line there. Obviously, there's a lot of receiving options to spread it around to, so maybe that's why his ADP is a little bit lower. But yeah, I like it. He had 12.3 points per game last year. It felt like he was a 12 to 15 point per game guy, even with AJ Dillon being annoying. And yeah, at the end of the season, they kind of went away from him. It will be interesting to see how much Ty Chandler touches the ball. I'm not really worried about Chandler, especially they go out and get Aaron Jones from their division rival. I think they're planning on heavily using him, especially with his age. You might as well just ride him out. So I do think it'll be a pretty fun Aaron Jones season. Maybe for Dynasty, you fade him a little bit. But yeah, this Vikings offense is pretty great. It's a good situation. They're going to be throwing it to him a lot, like you said, especially if it's JJ out there. So yeah, you can't really fault anyone for picking Aaron Jones. He's been solid for a few years now. It really is just the injuries. He's got to stay healthy out there.
Yeah, definitely not a dynasty, not a high dynasty pick, but yeah, for your standard 12 people PPR leagues, Aaron Jones should be an exciting option this season. Obviously for the future, he's 29 years old. We don't know how long this is going to last, but I think he will have a really good season in Minnesota.
Absolutely. Really excited for Aaron Jones. And with that, we'll move on to our RB17, Mr. Kenneth Walker, KW3. He's my RB17. He stores his RB18. He's a consensus RB17. He's our NFL seeker RB17. Really like Kenneth Walker. He has a lot of boom weeks, definitely has some down weeks. So there's a boom or bust type of player here, but he is just really solid. I think in the tier that he's going, with the players that he's going around, I do think he's the move. Hence why we have him ranked at his ADP. I do think he's a good pick. The Charbonnet situation, I'm not really too worried about Charbonnet really taking anything from him. He's just kind of that backup, that solid backup that will only play if Kenneth gets hurt or something. So yeah, he had 13.3 points last year. I think that's pretty solid. It's better than some of the running backs we just talked about, better than Aaron Jones. So yeah, I think it's going to be just a seamless transition, kind of just the same as he was last year. That 13.3 point per game sweet spot is probably where he'll be. So really like him. I think he's just a steady RB17. Really nothing too much to say.
Yeah, not a really flashy player, but a damn good running back. I mean, he's not going to be your PPR friend. He's not Alvin Kamara. He's not going to catch, 14 passes in a game. He's going to maybe catch 20 passes all season. That's kind of the production. I mean, from the past 2 years for Kenneth Walker, he has had in his target is 35 and 37 targets. So he's not a big PPR guy. He's not a big receiving guy. But what you're banking on with Kenneth Walker is those big break off runs. He's kind of like Nick Chubb. He's just a mean, fearless, run through the tackles type of guy who can break off those 60, 70, 80-yard runs no problem because he's got that home run type of ability. And in his 2 seasons, obviously his rookie season ran for 1,000 yards. Last season runs for 900 yards, and it's just steady with those 8, 9 touchdowns. And so that's kind of what you're banking on with Kenneth Walker. I feel like you kind of know what you're going to get. You're going to get those big boom weeks where he runs for 170 yards and 2 touchdowns, and then he does give you occasionally those duds where it's 60 yards and like maybe one catch and no touchdown. So Kenneth Walker, you're just hoping for those big breakout runs, those touchdowns, but this range, his ADP just feels about perfect. And like you said, the guys who's being picked around, you feel safe drafting Kenneth Walker.
Yeah, pretty solid projection as well. I predict him to get around 1,000 yards, 9 touchdowns. It's a pretty solid season. It definitely will repay that value. I could see him finishing as a top 15 running back easily. So I definitely like that 17 sweet spot that you're drafting him at. So yeah, anything else you want to say on Kenneth?
No, just an awesome running back. Just kind of like that Nick Chubb. You hope he turns it into that Nick Chubb where he can start getting more touchdowns. But that's he's like a poor man's, well, not I wouldn't say a poor man's. That's kind of disrespecting him because I think he's almost as good as a runner as Nick Chubb, but you're just hoping he finds the goal line a lot.
Yeah, super fun player. Like you said, he will have those boom weeks. He'll have those flash plays where he takes a screen 80 yards to the house, like he's had plenty of time. So love Kenneth Walker, love K Walk. We'll move on to our RB16, a very polarizing discussion here. It's Mr. James Cook for the Buffalo Bills. He's my RB14. Stores is RB23, the consensus RB12, and he's our NFL seeker RB16. Really interesting discussion. He finishes the RB12 last year, 13.7 points per game. Uh, really just kind of bring in a day three running back to fill out the depth chart. Ray Davis, in my opinion, I'm not too worried about Ray Davis really having a role just because I think we both predicted it because obviously Latavius Murray leaves. They needed to fill out they didn't have a backup running back on the roster. So we both kind of predicted that they would get Ray Davis because he looks like Latavius Murray. He plays like him. Doesn't have the most upside, but he's just that good short line or short yard back. So really like the pick, but I don't think that really affects James Cook in any way. And when you look at the rest of the roster, I don't really. I think you can make the argument he's our second best player on offense. I think it's Kincaid, and then if Keon Coleman doesn't work out, I think you can make a real argument that James Cook's their second best weapon on offense for Josh Allen. So I mean, I personally don't see a world where he finishes outside the top 15 finishing as the 12 last year. I think it's almost the same exact situation. They lose some Diggs targets, maybe some Curtis Samuel targets will come in. Maybe Kincaid will kind of grow into a real wide receiver one, and he'll steal some, and Josh Allen will definitely steal some rushing touchdown to the goal line. So I definitely see being lower on James Cook. I'm 2 spots lower on him than ADP as it is, but at the same time, I really don't really see him finishing outside the top 15 if he stays healthy. Just with Josh Allen, I think it's him, Dalton Kincaid, Josh Allen, and no one else really worries me. I think he really could be their second best option and maybe even their second most targeted option just because he's not the most talented runner. I don't really ever think I thought of him as like a great running back, but he is a talented football player. He's a good receiver. He had that game against the Cowboys last year with 221 yards. He just took over and won the game by himself. So I do think there's talent there, but I'll let you give your James Cook spiel.
Yeah, I'm not the highest on James Cook, and I never will be. Maybe it's just my little bit of bias coming in towards just Buffalo Bills running backs under Josh Allen. But, he just doesn't have a tremendous upside for scoring touchdowns. Obviously, last year he scored 2 touchdowns. He actually fumbled more than he did with rushing touchdowns. So he had 3 fumbles to 2 rushing touchdowns. So I didn't love that. But he did have a good year last year. He obviously ran for 1,100 yards, which was fourth in the league last year, to go along with 448 receiving yards. And he got it done a little bit more through the air with 4 touchdowns. And I know you're not as high on Ray Davis. I was very high on Ray Davis. I kind of feel like he could come into this role and take a good amount of chunk carries from James Cook, but maybe that could be a good thing for James Cook. Maybe it, gives him the ability to be the third down back, take more of the pass catching, maybe line him up in the slot because I feel like he can kind of move everywhere. I don't feel like he's really good at anything, like fantastic at anything, but he's okay at everything. But yeah, I don't project, James Cook to score much touchdowns. And you are kind of, in a PPR league, I guess you are kind of banking on him to be more productive through the receiving game. But he did have a very good season. I'm just lower on Buffalo Bills running backs because of Josh Allen, because he is the touchdown guy when it comes to the red zone. I think Josh Allen's had close to 40 rushing touchdowns in the last 4 years, if I'm correct. He almost runs for 10 touchdowns a season, so he bolsters all those. But yeah, just not the highest from me. But I mean, I kind of have a range of where James Cook could finish, kind of from 14 all the way to 25. But it's going to be interesting to see this Buffalo Bills offense this year because it is going to be substantially different from losing Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis, and just kind of to see how they narrate this offense.
Yeah, and you can kind of see where our opinions differ. It really just comes in on like the offense in general. First of all, I think it's pretty much the same exact offense. I think the production will be the exact same. They were actually pretty solid last year, and I think like James Cook, Curtis Samuel, Shakir, they'll all kind of Keon Coleman, they'll kind of fill in to share that Stephon Diggs like void all of his targets. I feel like they'll do a fine job at replacing him. I'm not really too worried about him. And then yeah, I see where we're differing on Ray Davis. I don't see Ray Davis having an impact year one really at all, other than that Latavius Murray rule. But Latavius Murray was like a 4 point guy in fantasy every week. So that's kind of how I see Ray Davis. Even though I really liked him as a prospect. He was a top 8 running back for me in the draft, just not really for like a 3 down starting running back, especially over a James Cook, can be more electric. So yeah, I definitely see where we differ. Josh Allen will be finessing a lot of touchdowns, long ones, goal line touchdowns. It's pretty brutal, but yeah, that's definitely where we differ. And I think it's an interesting pick. We're a little bit behind ADP on James Cook, but I personally have him in Dynasty League. I think he's projected 15.5 points week one. So I think, if he's falling in your leagues, definitely could be a steal for you.
Yeah, no, he definitely 100%. And like, we do differ in this. There's definitely guys where I can see more upside and I can see the picture a little bit more clear for them. And especially from a dynasty, aspect, of course, with obviously some younger rookie running backs, so I can kind of see taking that clear role and having a substantial impact all on the field with touchdowns and everything. But, if James Cook is falling in fantasy leagues, definitely draft him. I feel like, yeah, like you said, Dan, with the offense losing Stephon Diggs and everything, there will be more of a target share probably for James Cook to benefit from. So it will be fun to see how this Buffalo Bills offense does and how James Cook does this season.
Yeah, hopefully they really utilize him in the receiving game. Hopefully he gets around 4 to 5 receiving touchdowns again, maybe even more. And yeah, hopefully he keeps up the rushing production. I don't really expect 1,100 yards again, but hopefully he can, be a productive runner. But with that, we'll move on to our RB 15, someone that I know you're really excited to talk about, someone you're a little bit higher on than me, but it is Mr. Joe Mixon, another running back moving to a new team. Joe Mixon, the new Houston Texan. He's my RB 16. He stores RB 14. The consensus RB 15. He's our seekers RB 15. And I'll let you talk about him first. You're a little bit higher on him.
I am so excited for him to be paired with CJ Stroud in this offense. He is the clear-cut running back one in this group. And, it's a clear vision for me. There is going to be, I feel like the Texans really lacked with running back talent last year. And I feel like they finally got their dude. And I feel like it's going to help tremendously benefit CJ Stroud. And Joe Mixon will be that 3 down running back. Last year, I think correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure he did miss a couple games last year. But he still ended up with 1,000 rushing yards at 9 touchdowns, and he's just solid through. He gets a lot of target share through the air. I mean, in the last 3 seasons, 42, or sorry, excuse me, 48 targets, 75 targets, 64 targets to go along with 400 yards, 300 yards, and he gets a couple touchdowns through the air. But he's just solid, and I feel like in this Houston Texans offense with Bobby Slowick, they're just really going to utilize Joe Mixon perfectly, in my opinion. And I can see him being another 10 touchdown guy, 1,000 yards, no problem. And I feel like he's just going to be solid. I feel like CJ Stroud's going to find him on check down. CJ Stroud's going to find him through the air. And he's just going to be that perfect running back for Houston.
Yeah, so last year he had an awesome season. He did play the whole season, but he averaged 13, or no, he actually averaged 15 points per game. I had to double check that one. He averaged 15 points per game. He finishes the RB6. The Bengals were just completely pounding him. I mean, I would almost say they just pounded him into that production. They really did. It was a really great situation, but coming over to Houston, that this Texans offense is going to be awesome. He will be their best goal line back. He will get a lot of those goal line. Just, the Texans are going to be at the 1 yard line a lot. And I'm sure Joe Mixon will be the answer to those problems. So he's going to have good touchdown production here. Everything else, I'll kind of play devil's advocate with Joe Mixon. I am one spot lower on him than ADP. I'm just not really high on him as a football player anymore. Last year, he didn't really impress me at all, especially athletically. I don't really think he's that talented. I mean, definitely not athletically. He's not talented. But yeah, I just wasn't really impressed with him last year. Obviously, the situation was great and he was being pounded into fantasy production, which definitely could still happen here. But with Nico Collins, Stephon Diggs, Tank Dell, all of the options to throw to, and his age kind of coming into play, he just got released because of how bad he kind of looked on the field last year. And D'Amico Ryans did mention that he wanted to get Dameon Pierce a role. He did want him to, split a little bit so Joe Mixon stays healthy. And that would be interesting. I'm not really buying into that. I think it will be Joe Mixon's like full backfield, kind of how it was last year for Singletary. It felt like Pierce had like a week or two, and that's about it. So I do expect it to be Joe Mixon's full backfield. I'm not too low on him or anything, but I do think there's just a few younger, exciting options. When you historical data kind of points to not kind of staying away from running backs above 27 and around his age is just kind of where they start to downfall in their career. So I'm a little bit lower on Joe Mixon, not gonna lie. Maybe it's because I just wasn't too impressed with him on tape last year, but he did really produce in fantasy. He was a great pick last year, and I'm sure with this offense he'll be fine.
Yeah, no, Joe Mixon, yeah, he definitely, it was the sheer volume that made him productive in fantasy. But I kind of just see that same exact role moving over to Houston. And I feel like they will. Obviously, they had Jake Browning starting half the season last year. But I feel like the Texans will be in a lot more goal to goal, opportunities to score touchdowns around the red zone. And he does an okay job of getting in the end zone. He does. I wouldn't say he's fantastic. Wouldn't say he, is amazing at it, but given the volume he did last year and the last few years, he does find his way into the end zone. You give it to Joe Mixon up, he will find his way into the end zone. But I do understand you playing devil's advocate, and obviously the age is a scare because at 27 going on 28, he is in the twilight year of his career. And he didn't look that great. He really didn't. He looked slow. He looked slow. He wasn't ultra productive. You didn't see those 15, 20 yard burst runs very often from the last year. So I totally understand that point as well.
Anything else you want to say on Joe? I think we've covered everything pretty well. I expect around like 8 or 9 touchdowns, honestly, again, just because he will be that goal line back in this good situation. I guess I'm most interested to see his receiving game. Like I don't know if he has the most receiving upside anymore, too, just because of how he is physically, but at the same time, he is their best receiving back in this room. So that will be interesting. He'll kind of just be, pounded into production again, like you said. So yeah, he is very polarizing. I think around RB15 is fine. He'll probably finish right around here if he's healthy. So yeah, I like the pick.
Yeah, for sure. He's going to be solid. Nothing flashy, but you are going to get those touchdowns from Joe Mixon.
Absolutely. And with that, we'll move on to our RB14. Very polarizing. Alvin Kamara. He's been here for a while. He's my RB15. Stores is RB11. The consensus RB16, and he comes in at our NFL Seekers RB14. I'll definitely let you talk about him first. You're 4 spots higher on him.
Yes, Alvin Kamara is the focal point of the Saints offense. He has been for years. He is one of the most incredible receiving backs. But with Alvin Kamara, you just know you're going to get that production through the air. I mean, the dude has averaged. I mean, I'll go back to I'll read his entire career since 2007 from the receiving game, just on targets. 100 targets, 105 targets, 97 targets, 107. And it did dip a little bit, 67, 77, 86. But it is just there. His target share in that offense is going to be huge. Derek Carr is check down Carr. He's scared. He looks to get rid of the ball quick. Alvin Kamara is going to benefit from that. And you're really going to have those big spike weeks from Alvin Kamara as well. There was one week last year, correct me if I'm wrong. Sorry, I don't have his regular season.
I have it pulled up.
Yeah, he had a game with 20 receptions, if I'm not mistaken, or was it like 14? I can't remember. It's like between 20 and
So
14.
his first game back from suspension, he had 13 catches, but it was only for 33 yards. And I think it was like 20 targets. And then 2 weeks later, he had 12 catches for 91 yards. That one might have been around 20 targets as well.
Okay, yeah, no. So his target share is ridiculous. Derek Carr is a check down menace. He's scared back there. But yeah, it's just with Alvin Kamara, it's if and this is strictly PPR because if it's not PPR, I don't value Alvin Kamara that high. But in a PPR platform, Alvin Kamara is going to get that, 75 receptions, to go along with, 400 or 500 yards and a few touchdowns. But yeah, you're going to have those Alvin Kamara weeks where he can catch 13 passes for 33 yards, but it doesn't matter because that's still 16 points right there for fantasy. So he doesn't have to be productive. He's just got to catch those passes. And I have no doubt he'll definitely get the volume in that offense that's lacking a lot of talent.
Yeah, you summed that up perfectly because, like you said, at the end of the season, he was kind of struggling as a running back. He was struggling on the ground to get production. His last 2 games, he couldn't finish over 10 points. I am a Alvin Kamara fantasy owner of last year, so I definitely remember the end of season struggle for Alvin Kamara. Kind of ended my playoff run, but yeah, actually, yeah, kind of just getting PTSD right now. He's like the reason I lost in the playoffs. But anyways, it is interesting because as long as Derek Carr's there, his receiving floor is just too great. Like it's almost comical. Like you said, Derek Carr is just scared. If he even senses pressure, he just will automatically check it down to Kamara. You can expect like 10 targets a game for Kamara throughout the season. So that's very valuable as long as Derek Carr is there. You don't really need to worry about his production on the ground because he's going to get you that 10-point floor just from reception. So yeah, as long as Derek Carr is there, I'm totally fine with us being higher on him than consensus as the top 14 running back. I think it's fun. I personally got him in Dynasty and I'm excited for it. He had 17.9 fantasy points last year. That's pretty absurd. That's really impressive. Only missed 4 games and 3 of suspension. So yeah, really love Kamara. I think he will be slept on because of the age. He might get faded a little bit, but yeah, if you can snag him, especially behind ADP, I think he will definitely pay off.
100%. Yes. I mean, this is PPR we're talking about. Of course, just have to reiterate that a lot because that is why he is so high. But yeah, I mean, again, I'll just reiterate it one more time. There's just not a lot of talent. There's not a lot of talent. Obviously, you have Chris Olave. He's a deep threat. Derek Carr's got to have plenty of time in the pocket. They do add Tilly Tilly Sifuanga. They did draft him in the first round. Sorry, just there's so many offensive tackles. But he should help the right side of that offensive line. He is an absolute mauler, so he will add some value to Alvin Kamara in the running game. But yeah, you're just banking on those targets and that target share for Kamara.
Absolutely. Very fun player. And speaking of fun, polarizing players, let's go on to our RB13. Really interesting discussion. I feel like a lot of people are expecting to see him in our top 10 running back episodes. So we will be talking about him here. We're a little bit low, as you see here. He's my RB11. He stores his RB15. He's going as the consensus RB8 right now. He's being drafted in pretty much the second round of drafts right now. And he comes in as our RB13. So we're a little bit lower on him than consensus. And I got to start it off with like a full disclosure. I do want to say he's probably like the most dynamic running back. He definitely was the most dynamic running back in the whole NFL last year. It's pretty incredible. His spikes are crazy. He had 17.3 points per game last year, which is just absurd as a rookie. That's unheard of stuff. So I understand, like, if you're in a best ball underdog league, you push him way up your rankings. I'd find drafting him at his ADP in a league like that where you're just shooting for the upside. At the same time, playing devil's advocate with Achane, I love the player, love the dynamism, but he's a complete committee running back right now. Mostert just had a great season, racked up a lot of touchdowns, might be their goal line back still, like day one. this season. So he's going to be splitting with him, not to mention the third round running back, Jalen Wright. You give him that draft capital, like it or not, he's going to get some looks. And the thing that scares me is Achane's really not the smoothest receiving back. He's really not that smooth of a receiver at all. So it might give Jalen Wright a window of opportunity to get on the field and, you know, cut into Achane's workload and production ultimately. So, like I said, in the underdog best ball leagues, you really push him closer to his ADP, and I'm fine, drafting him, and maybe even dynasty, you push him up because he's so young and the outlook could be awesome in this offense. But in your redraft standard PPR leagues, he's not the best receiver. The efficiency really should fall off. If it doesn't, then he might just be the best running back ever. So, just assuming the efficiency falls off just a little bit, I think we're actually at a pretty appropriate spot ranking.
Yeah, he was, dude. Last year, I just remember in our fantasy group text, I remember sending a text, and I think it was, gosh, I think it was maybe the Buffalo game or it was the Giants game that he played. But I just remember finally sending the text. I'm like, is this guy the greatest running back we've ever seen ever? Period. I mean, it was just stupid. I mean, every single carry, the guy was it was 10 yards. It was like, what the hell? You couldn't even make it up. And then almost like every third carry was like a 50-yard touchdown. He had the most like breakaway touchdowns. It was the craziest thing ever. And he's electrically fast and just a polarizing. And we say polarizing. This is what we mean by polarizing. Devon Achane is polarizing. He's the most polarizing player maybe I've ever seen, period. Um, but I mean, he played in 10 games last year. And let me just tell you his longest runs in each of those games. 25 yards, 45 yards, 76 yards, 55 yards, 67 yards. His explosive run rate is absolutely asinine. I've never seen anything like it. He was averaging 7.8 yards per carry, per touch. That's unheard of. We've never even seen. That's almost double what most really good running backs average. A good running back's averaging 4 yards per carry. He was averaging 7.8. That is ridiculous. I mean, and to go along in the receiving game, he's absolutely electric too when he gets in open space. He can't be touched. He just has those breakaway type plays. But yeah, the reason why I have him lower and below ADP is because I'm scared of that Dolphins offense. I don't know how they're going to utilize him this year. Obviously, he had an injury last year that he's coming back from. And you draft Jalen Wright, who is another 4-3 running back to go along. He's your third, fourth. All three of these guys are 4-3 running backs. They don't complement each other very well. They're all kind of the same, quicker than fast, just incredible speed. 4-3 running backs, and to go along with Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill, it's the fastest team ever. So it will be interesting to see how they handle this committee, but it is a heavy committee, and you just drafted running back very high, and I don't feel like they have the best offensive line this year. So I don't know. I am a little bit lower, but again, this guy might be the best running back of all time. So, we'll see. And I said that like 3 games into watching him average 10 yards a carry. It's ridiculous. I think he might be the best running back ever. It's just I don't know how this offense is going to utilize him and how this committee is going to go this year. So it does scare me a little bit.
Yeah, you worded it perfectly. It's really impossible to rank and predict what he's going to do. He's in this passing offense when he's not really the best passing, best pass catching running back. So it's interesting. It's an interesting projection, but as we saw last year, the upside is literally immense. It's like absurd upside. Against the Broncos in week 3 in his third NFL game, he had 18 carries, 203 yards, 2 touchdowns on the ground, 2 touchdowns receiving. He was 51.3 fantasy points. So you can get those type of weeks with this dude because he is absurd. He was looking like Chris Johnson, Jamal Charles in their prime last year, like straight up. It's just crazy. And, the frame with the injuries, it's a little bit scary. There are some things, and most importantly, the committee that scare us off a little bit, but we do acknowledge fully the upside is more immense than anyone will really talk about in this whole ranking. So definitely, I understand the pick.
Yeah, maybe I just don't have the balls to draft him, as the ADP running back gate. But somebody could, it could pay off. But I can't see the vision with all three of those guys, especially with Mozart, scored 20 touchdowns last year, and so and Jalen Wright is electric. He was actually my RB1 going into this draft process, so he's my favorite running back. I think he's incredibly explosive. And it would be kind of crazy to not see him get a fair amount of touches being a third round draft pick. So, like you said, I don't know. Maybe we just don't have the balls. We're a little scared, but I mean, the upside to be the best running back of all time is there for Devon Achane. So we're not denying those facts.
Yeah, very wide range of outcomes with Devon Achane. Really fun discussion, honestly. I guess we'll move on to our RB12, another fun discussion. Isiah Pacheco averaged 15.3 points per game. Last year, he's my RB12. He stores his RB13, consensus RB13. He comes in our NFL Seekers RB12. And I'll pat myself on the back with Isiah Pacheco last year in our rankings and our fantasy sleepers episodes that we put out. I was pounding the table for Isiah Pacheco. He's being drafted in the 20s. And at the end of the previous year, he was the Chiefs' bell cow. He had a great playoff run. He had that Super Bowl where he balled out. And so I was really high on him last offseason and drafting him because I just assumed he would be their number one in that run game. A lot of people thought McKinnon and CEH would have got a lot more work, but I was just confident in him being that main guy. And now, fast forward to 2024, he is their only running back, really. Like, you aren't worried about any other running backs on the roster. And I really don't think you can say that for any other running back because every running back room is so stacked. There's like two, three like star running backs on every team, it feels like now. But Isiah Pacheco is really the only dude. He's a lone dog in that backfield. So that alone with the Chiefs offense, I'm buying into. We kind of joked last year the Chiefs were run first in the regular season because they didn't need to throw the ball. They didn't really need to do much because they were in every game anyway. So I think it'll kind of be that way. I think their regular season games will be ground pound, grind it out type of games. And Pacheco is just going to be a fantasy beast again. He, like I said, finished with 15 points per game. Last year, he finishes the RB 15. I don't see a world where he finishes outside the top 15, and there's definitely some upside there. I think they used him a lot more. They definitely target him a lot more in the second half of the season in the receiving game, and that's pretty exciting. He's a capable receiver with how fast he is. So, yeah, I love Pacheco. I love the situation. It's really a perfect situation when you really think about it. He's going to get all the goal line carries, and there's not too many stars on this team either with how good the offense is to take away production.
Yeah, and I mean Isiah Pacheco, man, like you don't worry about tread on this guy's tires because just the more you feed him, the stronger he gets. The dude's never not won a Super Bowl in his NFL career. Just pointing that out. He may go a third year with doing that, which is just ridiculous. But I mean, just sturdy as a rock, man. He is so solid. Those 15 points per game is just fantastic. That is exactly what you want from running back. You just know what you're getting from Isiah Pacheco. I mean, 900 yards on the ground last year with 7 rushing touchdowns to go along with 44 receptions for 244 yards and 2 touchdowns. He's just solid as a rock, man. I just see him getting even better this year. I feel like he's going to get more comfortable in that offense. He's just going to continue to become a better runner, and I could see his touchdown production going up because, like you said, there's a lot of room for touches for Isiah Pacheco because he is one of the stars of this team, and they are the run first Chiefs in the regular season and even in the playoffs. I mean, he's just an incredible running back, and you know they're not dumb to go through Isiah Pacheco because he's that good, and he complements Patrick Mahomes very well. So I kind of see the exact same production almost as last year. I don't really see his ADP or anything moving. I feel like you know what you're getting out of Isiah Pacheco, which is a very safe pick.
Yeah, really solid season last year. He had 935 rushing yards, 7 rushing touchdowns, 2 receiving touchdowns. This year, ESPN projects him at 978 rushing yards, 8 rushing touchdowns, 2 receiving touchdowns. Fantasy Pros projects him at 1,000 yards rushing and 10 rushing touchdowns. I'm right there. I think he'll definitely crack 1,000 if he stays healthy because there aren't any other running backs to split with. So I project 1,010 as well. I like that. I think he's going to have a great season, definitely outpay that RB13 ADP. I think he's definitely someone that I'm drafting a lot of this year.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, he could definitely crack that top 10. But again, I just feel like you're not going to be frustrated with Isiah Pacheco. Like he's not a frustrating running back. He's just solid as nails. That's what it is.
Speaking of solid as nails, let's go on to our last running back we'll talk about today. Rachaad White from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers is my RB13. Stores is RB10. The consensus RB14, and he's our NFL Seekers RB11. So we're definitely higher on this guy. He's someone we're calling our shot on, and we're drafting in these early rounds above some of these other guys we've talked about. So I'll let you talk about Rachaad White first. You've got him in the top 10.
Yes, Rachaad White is a incredible running back, and people won't realize that last year just because how bad the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offensive line was. I mean, he was almost getting touched as right as he was getting the ball, but the fact that he was still able to average 3.6 yards per carry with that atrocious offensive line is just honestly magnificent to me because there's just no way I could see any other running back doing that. But he is a volume running back. He is a guy that can do it all. He is a three down running back. He can catch, he can run, he can do every single thing. And, I feel like they're going to use him just as much as they did last year. I mean, he had 272 carries for 990 yards with 6 touchdowns to go along with 64 receptions on 70 targets for 549 receiving yards and 3 touchdowns. Just rock solid, man. Just rock solid. The volume's there. You know, maybe it didn't look like it last year, but he is an explosive, really good athlete. And, they add some help and some depth to that offensive line. So maybe that should, help his production a little bit. But I'm really excited for Rachaad White, man. I want as many shares as I can, especially at his ADP of 14. That is a tremendous value, tremendous steal because I don't see a realm where he gets worse than last year.
I mean, just what a player he was last year. He was the RB4. He averaged 15.8 points. No one's talking about that with the how does the ADP of 14 even make sense? Why is he being drafted 10 spots below where he finished last year when he's in the exact same situation, minus the fact that they're bringing in a first round center, Graham Barton, to really help him. And the interior blocking was abysmal for the Buccaneers, like you said, last year. And let me just read off his stats from week 7 on. He had 16, 18, 28, 17.8, 17.8, 13, 19.6, 21.5, 21.9, 19.7, 8.6, and 13.3. So he literally was a league winner. He was the definition of a league winning running back last year, especially where he was being drafted. We were higher on him as well. By the way, in our running back rankings, we were much higher on him because we knew he would be that bell cow and this great he was just going to get all the volume. So yeah, definitely a very consistent, steady running back. You can expect around 15 points per game, and just you aren't really worrying about him like having a dud week, scoring less than 10 because the volume's just immense. He's their really only runner. They bring in Bucky Irving, who neither of us were high on. I'm not worried about him taking really anything from Rachaad White. So I'm expecting the same exact season as last year, and he's being drafted as RB14. That's a steal.
Yep. And he's going to be 25 years old the entire season. So he's still a young, explosive running back. So, yeah, like you said, the ADP of 14 does not make sense for the running back for last year. Buy all the shares you can. We will say that right now. Buy all the shares you can of Rachaad White because, you know, I don't see, yeah, again, I don't know how he can fail for fantasy.
Yep, 6 rushing touchdowns last year, 990 rushing yards. I expect around 900 rushing yards, 7 touchdowns. Literally the exact same production, around 250 fantasy points. So I think he'll be a great option. Again, outpaying that ADP, being a possible league winning option with the volume. That's what you want to target with your running backs is the volume. So I think we did a good job of highlighting those volume running backs. And yeah, anything else you want to say in Rachaad?
No, I'm just ready for my exit hot take. I was thinking about it already.
All right. Well, I was thinking about it too, since we're talking Panthers, and I kind of felt bad for not talking about Jonathan Brooks in the honorable mentions. I just want to real quick give my extra hot take that
Go
Jonathan
ahead.
Brooks starts immediately, and he is that dude over Chuba because people in Panthers Twitter think that Chuba is going to be that guy, but I think Jonathan Brooks is like a top 20-ish running back.
You'll take the Panthers one. I'll go a little different route, but I will stick with the rookie running back theme. And I'm gonna go Blake Corum finishes as the top. I'm gonna say 23. I'm gonna say top 23 running back. Blake Corum comes into a Rams offense are competing with Kyron Williams, but I do not think that matters. I think he is a win now running back who has tremendous upside through, I feel like he's, like we compared him. He's a Kyron Williams clone. He can get it done through the air. He scored 27 touchdowns last year at Michigan. Watch out for Blake Corum being a sneakily sneaky good guy that you can get probably towards the back 5 rounds of your fantasy drafts.
It's bold. I definitely love Corin because of he is Kyron. He's a perfect replacement, and there's a lot of scary injury concerns with Kyron. I don't know if he could finish that high if Kyron was healthy, just because I don't know if the Rams could produce two insane running backs like that with Cup and Puka. But if something happened to Kyron because there is those scary injury concerns, I could easily see, uh, I could easily see Corin outpaying and being like a league winner if that happened.
That's a hot take, baby. Let's go.
All right. Anything else you want to say?
No, no, I'm excited to get into our top 10 running backs here come Saturday. I think when we're going to get this out to you for our top 10, but stay tuned. All the fantasy, all the fantasy stuff is coming. It's full steam for fantasy. I mean, like I said, we're in the dog days of summer, but stay tuned for all the fantasy content. We're going to make it a fun summer. We're going to get you through the summer into football season. So, keep liking, supporting, subscribing, sharing, commenting, all the good stuff, that helps keep the lights on around here and, helps grow the page.
Absolutely. We appreciate the support. Tune into our fantasy rankings. We'll have receivers coming out after our top 10 running backs. So definitely stay tuned. We'll come out with some mock drafts as well. So it should be really fun. All the fantasy content this summer. Thank you for tuning in. Like, comment, subscribe for the algorithm. Peace.
Peace.